This is Hazel O'Gorman, and this is my fourth attempt at reading the Enuma Elis. I am so done with this. There are 7 tablets to this wonderful story of Babylonian creation. Most of it is dedicated to Marduk killing Tiamat and all that jazz. I'm just going to get into it. Again, I want this to be over. I'm reading a summarized version. I initially attempted, 2 times, I attempted reading the full version. The 4 attempts I described, which I'm now on my fourth, are of the summarized version. I'm using a summarized version because, one, there are a lot of pieces missing from the original, and two, um, again, this is a very short video that I am to record, so I will be choosing a shorter version of the story to choose. I don't know where to go from here. Let's just begin. In the beginning, there was only undifferentiated water swirling in chaos. Out of this swirl, the waters divided into sweet, fresh water, known as the god Apsu, and salty, bitter water, the goddess Tiamat. Once differentiated, the union of these two entities gave birth to the younger gods. These young gods, however, were extremely loud, troubling the sleep of Apsu at night and distracting him from his work by day. Upon the advice of his vizier Mamu, Apsu decides to kill the younger gods. Tiamat, hearing of their plan, warns her eldest son Enki, sometimes Ea, and he puts Apsu to sleep and kills him. From Apsu's remains, Enki creates his home. Tiamat, who was once the supporter of the younger gods, is now very upset that they have killed her mate. She consults with the god Chingu, who advises her to make war on the younger gods. Tiamat then rewards Chingu with the Tablets of Destiny, which legitimize the rule of a god and control the fates, and he wears them proudly as a breastplate. With Chingu as her champion, Tiamat summons the forces of chaos and creates 11 horrible monsters to destroy her children. Ea, Enki, and the younger gods fight against Tiamat in futility until from among them emerges the champion Marduk, who swears he will defeat Tiamat. He defeats Chingu, and then he kills Tiamat by shooting her with an arrow that splits her in two. Her eyes then cry out the rivers of the Tigris and the Euphrates, and from Tiamat's corpse, he creates the heavens and the earth and appoints various gods to the various, duties that gods tend to have, and binds Tiamat's 11 creatures that she created to his feet as trophies before sending their images in his new home. He also takes the Tablets of Destiny from Chingu so he can be a legitimate king and all that, controlling the fates and whatnot. And after the gods have finished praising him for his awesome victory and his great creation, he consults with Ea, who's now the god of wisdom, and decides to create human beings from the remains of whoever encouraged Tiamat to make war. They figure out Chingu was the guy that did that. He's charged as guilty and killed, and from his blood, Ea creates Lulu, who's the first man who's just a sort of helper to the gods to keep order in the world and keep chaos at bay. Then the 7th tablet is just kind of dedicated to worshipping Marduk a whole lot. I apologize, by the way, if I am mispronouncing any of these names. This was written in Akkadian and has been translated numerous times, and I really, really should have looked into that before doing this, but I really don't want to do this a 5th/7th time. So I'll now simply begin on my description of why I chose this story and the significance it holds to the Babylonians, if that is going to work. Just to briefly touch on why I chose this story, I don't know much about the Babylonians or their mythology, or really too much about them whatsoever. I learned about them in my 6th grade history class, and that was about it. However, they're one of the first societies that we know of, and we don't really know, we do know quite a lot about them, but I don't, and I want to know more about them because they're very interesting, and it tells you a lot about the people of a society by analyzing their stories. That's what we're doing in this class after all. So just to get into it, I suppose, primarily, this story is very important to the Babylonians because it tells them why they should be worshipping Marduk, who's like their big, super awesome god that they love a whole lot. Interestingly, it describes him as... They put a lot of emphasis on how powerful he is, and there's lots of emphasis on his creative abilities. However, what I especially find to be interesting is he was the king of the gods, right? And of course, the Babylonians were ruled over by a sort of king. So it very clearly has that parallel that this is how the gods live, this is how the humans live, right? And that's somewhat interesting to me, I guess. I don't really know what more commentary there is to have on that. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Use the gods as models for how the people should live. It showcases creation via differentiation. I have a little bullet list here, by the way. I mean, you can probably tell I'm reading off of something. It showcases creation via differentiation, which is pretty similar to most of the myths that we've covered so far. But I find this especially interesting for the Babylonians because, as we've touched upon, myth is very much a way of communicating scientific knowledge and that sort of thing. The Babylonians were, again, they're like the first guys. So it's interesting that they have lots of, or at least sufficient scientific knowledge to be able to incorporate, again, the idea that all things can be derived from or built into other things. It was Apsu and Tiamat. They started as one being. And interestingly, again, Apsu and Tiamat are the gods of order and chaos. And yet, neither is necessarily a good guy. Both are just things that exist, and both of them end up having to be killed for the world to exist. Order is important to have, but too much of it causes Apsu to get really upset, and he wants to kill everyone that's making lots of noise, and that's no good. But Tiamat is super capricious and turns on the young gods and wants to kill them because of a plan that she was arguably complicit in, which is, bad, considering that's like everyone. And as you see at the very end of the story, humans are tasked with the maintenance of order, keeping chaos at bay, so on and so forth, which shows a very important emphasis on balance for the Babylonians. Of course, order is the one that they seem to definitely prefer, but this myth showcases that both kind of have their flaws. And overall, while order is very important to keep, and we need to keep order, I mean, I don't know, I'm just kind of talking in circles here. I apologize. I'll simply move on to my next point. Again, it describes him, Marduk, it describes Marduk as a big, powerful king who is specifically great because he was so strong and powerful. He's praised for his victory over Tiamat. He's super strong, kills her with that arrow, creates the Tigris and Euphrates. That's so wonderful. Look at him. He's such a great guy, isn't he? He has those tablets of destiny that gives him the authority to rule over everything. It shows what they valued in a king. They value someone who's powerful, someone who can provide for their people, but someone who can also defend them, which, again, is exactly the sort of story that the, Babylonian government would want to go out espousing, talking about how the government's super great because they keep order and balance, and they're just like that Marduk guy because they're super powerful and strong. It's also another instance of a divine origin story, because people were created from Chingu's blood, of course. This is somewhat interesting to me because Chingu was specifically chosen to be the one that they took the blood from because he's the one that created the whole war. He's the one that that advised Tiamat to go about and, kill all those people. This shows that they have a very warlike perspective on people, that people are very... We literally have the most warlike god's blood and remains flowing through us. That's what we're made of. Supposedly, of course. And I don't know, that is an interesting perspective, to me at least. And ties into the thing with the king. Again, they need a big, powerful guy who's going to fight a whole lot and be super awesome and strong. And that's, like, where we come from. We come from fighting and being strong and all that, which is a really... I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that. I mean, war is bad and all that. But it's interesting to see that perspective, because while there are lots of things that are very similar to other societies, such as, again, the creation via differentiation and the existence of the divine origin in the first place, normally the whole warlike business is something that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's not super heavily emphasized as an aspect of our existence to the point where it's literally baked into us. And as a last detail, I was doing some research into initially trying to find more of the tablets from what was missing. And it turns out they would often recite the tablets at their equivalent of like the New Year's festival, I suppose. Which is, I don't know. I mean, it's touched upon in the epilogue. It says, "Let the names of Marduk be held in remembrances, and let the first man proclaim them. Let the wise and understanding consider them together. Let the father repeat them and teach them to his son." Yada yada yada. This is very similar to some of the Native American gods that we've talked about. For instance, we were just talking about the what were their names? Heart of Sky, when creating the people from the mud and the wood and the corn, and of course the animals. They're very concerned about their names being remembered, very concerned about being talked about, having their stories told and everything. These gods are very clearly just as invested in being talked about and worshipped, and talking about them is itself worship, which I find to be, again, interesting. So, in summary, I guess, why the story is important to the Babylonians is because it tells them why they need to worship Marduk, how they need to worship Marduk by talking about him a whole lot and why he's super awesome. It communicates some pretty basic, admittedly, but still rather important scientific understandings. And it tells them what their society should look like by telling them that they need to have, powerful, awesome kings that can provide. Which is, its whole own bag of worms. But it also showcases, humanity's divine origin, supposedly, which is a theme that shows up, everywhere from Abrahamic religion to Babylonian religion to Greek religion to, most of the stories that we've covered and that exist out there showcase gods creating people for some reason, which I think is, I don't know, it's interesting to see that it has its roots here as well. I don't know what else I was really expecting, but this has been a very insightful look at this story, at least for me. I'll provide a link to the summary that I recited in the description of this video. I don't know if I need to necessarily do that, but it feels like the right thing to do, and yeah. Thank you very much for your time. I really hope this recording works. Goodbye.